And joining us now in the studio to discuss today's extraordinary events are Fairfax journalist Kate McClymont, who's been covering the ICAC inquiries, and the Executive Director of the Sydney Institute, Gerard Henderson, who's a political commentator and also author of Menzies' Child, A History of the Liberal Party. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Hi, Steve.
Kate, you've been covering these ICAC inquiries in depth. Nobody saw this coming, did they?
Absolutely not. And in fact, the first time that the Grange was, the $3,000 bottle of Grange was even mentioned was only yesterday morning. So within 24 hours, it's brought down a premier. It seems completely extraordinary that this has happened, and especially someone like Barry O'Farrell, who has always been regarded as rather a clean skin and an honest operator.
Gerard, you gave Barry O'Farrell a job back in the 1980s when you were Chief of Staff.
Yes, I gave Barry O'Farrell his first big job on John Howard's office in September 1985.
What's your personal reflection of today's events?
Well, my personal reflection is this. We're supposed to be dealing with the Independent Commission Against Corruption. They've had two big victims in 25 years. One was an honest reforming Premier, Nick Greiner, and the other was an honest reforming Premier in Barry O'Farrell. This is not a great record of achievement. I mean, the idea that you would lose your job because you accepted and probably drank a bottle of wine, which you didn't try to sell, and you didn't even try to pawn it, you probably drank it. The idea that, can I just finish? The idea that this would bring you down is not the idea of campaigning against corruption when the ICAC was set up about a quarter of a century ago.
Kate, you wanted to respond?
I think that you're missing the point as to what actually brought him down, and that was the fact that he gave unequivocal evidence under oath before ICAC that he did not receive this bottle of wine. So when there was a telephone record shown that he received a call, or that the Premier made a call to Nick DiGirolamo that night, and then this morning when it was revealed that there was a handwritten note from the Premier, there really was nothing else he could do. It's not that anyone set out to trap Mr. O'Farrell. It's just that he painted himself into a corner from which there was no escaping.
Yes, but I understand exactly what happened. I mean, I read the newspapers, listen to the news. But the point is this, that Barry O'Farrell's out. Australia's got a reputation of being corrupt, as has New South Wales, as has Sydney, over a bottle of wine, which he probably drank, and I know Barry well over a long period. He's not particularly interested in wine, as I understand it. I wouldn't know the cost of a bottle of Grange. I would have no idea it was worth $3,000. If someone gave it to me, I'd probably drink it. And I may or may not forget about it. But what's ICAC doing with this? I mean, don't tell me that... Can I just finish? Don't tell me that the people down at ICAC are happy with all this, and if they're not happy with all this, what are they doing in this area? What's this got to do with corruption?
I can explain.
Good.
Right. So the $3,000 bottle of wine was given a month before there was a meeting in Barry O'Farrell's office where Nick DiGirolamo was given an audience. So the $3,000 bottle was given at the very time this person was lobbying for what stood to be a $1 billion public-private partnership. So it is an avenue that needs to be explored. So
you're a journalist who reports stories, and that's your business, and you do it well, and that's what you're paid for, and it's fun and games. But I'm interested in consequences. Australian Water Holdings got nothing out of the O'Farrell government. It got nothing. So we're having these big inquiries into an organisation, however much they tried to lobby and however many bottles of wine they sent to people, they didn't get anything. So where's the corruption? They're a failed company.
Kate, on that issue, given the scale of corruption that has been exposed by the ICAC in the last 12 months, isn't this a relatively trivial issue?
Look, I think it is a relatively trivial issue, but I think when you get on the stand, there is a 5-year maximum jail penalty for giving false and misleading evidence.
Yeah, that's a very unfair implication. No, you're suggesting the former Premier may have given misleading evidence. There's no evidence to support that. That's your theory based on sitting in the room.
Gerard, he's resigned. He's resigned.
Because he said he forgot. So
no, he didn't resign because he said he forgot.
No, he said he forgot. You're suggesting that he didn't tell the truth. That's what you're suggesting.
Yes, I am suggesting.
Well, that's a very serious allegation to make with no evidence.
No, Gerard,
you have no evidence that he didn't tell the truth.
Gerard,
that's an outrageous allegation to make.
Gerard, that's what the note is all about.
No, it's not. He may have forgotten.
No, Gerard.
You're
okay,
confused.
No, Gerard. I think I was listening to the evidence. You may not have been.
But he
Now,
never
Gerard,
said he
listen
didn't
to
tell
me.
the truth.
Gerard, listen.
Well, you're pretty confused about this.
No,
Yes, you are.
Gerard. I'm sorry, but I sat in there, you did not. Now, when he says, if I had received this bottle of wine, not only would I remember because it was a vintage Penfolds Grange Hermitage, I would have also entered it into my pecuniary interest declaration. Now, neither of those things were done. So, because he was so adamant about these things, when a note came showing that, in fact, he had received the wine and he'd sent a thank you letter, he really had nowhere to go.
But the fact he was so adamant is consistent with forgetting, because he's not a silly man, and if he remembered he'd done all this, he wouldn't get up and say the opposite, because he would know he would lose his job. You've classified him as untruthful without the faintest bit of evidence. He may well have forgotten.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on this.
Well, I think you should agree not to make allegations about matters of which you know nothing.
No. Gerard,
you don't know his state of mind.
Gerard,
you
I
have
was
no
sitting
idea.
there, I heard the evidence and you did not.
No, but you don't. Well, I did hear the evidence as it was reported.
Gerard, did Barry O'Farrell need to resign?
Well, in view of the current situation, you probably have no alternative. I mean, Nick Greiner had to retire, had to resign. So
he said today he regrets resigning.
Well, I think a lot of New South Wales citizens regret that he had to, but this is the farce we've got to, that the Independent Commission Against Corruption is getting victories over people like Mr Greiner and Mr O'Farrell. Meanwhile, all this other corruption's going on without any marked successes, as I can see it. I mean, I think we've lost the plot. This idea was taken by Gary Sturgis, who worked for Nick Greiner. I opposed it at the time. He got the idea from Hong Kong, and Hong Kong had special problems they had to deal with. He brought a Hong Kong concept to Sydney, and since then I don't think it's had very good results. And if anyone's telling me that IPAC's really happy that they've got rid of the Premier, I think people ought to reassess where ICAC's coming from.
Okay, is ICAC failing as an institution when you see two premiers regarded as decent men and with no evidence of corruption against them having to fall on their swords?
Look, I do think that there is absolutely no joy on anyone's behalf about what has happened today. But having said that, we are yet to hear the final report is yet to be handed down in this matter. This will be later this year. And look, without ICAC, we would not have uncovered what has been really the most serious allegation that this state has seen in corruption terms, and that is that the family of former Labor power broker Eddie Obeid, his family actually received $30 million from a corrupt
Gerard, can I ask you about that?
But I'll just make one point.
Sure.
Eddie Obeid was sacked by the Labor Premier before ICAC got involved.
Do you think ICAC has been failing when it comes to what it's exposed about the Obeid family and former Upper House member in New South Wales, Ian MacDonald?
Well, it hasn't failed in that area, but we haven't seen any results either. I mean, nobody's been put up on charges, nobody's gone to prison. I don't know where it's all going to end up, but all I know is they've got as victims Mr Greiner and Mr O'Farrell, who were two of the best premiers New South Wales ever had. I wouldn't be happy if I was ICAC.
Okay, the story of the bottle of Grange first surfaced in the Daily Telegraph in March. Now, there have been further questions asked about this in ICAC this afternoon, about who leaked the information in the first place. What can you tell us about that exchange?
Well, it was an exchange right at the end of the last day of the inquiry, and it was asking whether or not this information had come to the News Limited journalist via Chris Hartcher, who is another Liberal minister who will be facing ICAC in a week or so. And Mr Di Girolamo said that he didn't believe so, and in fact he was sure that he hadn't told anyone about this bottle of wine. So it's going to be fascinating as to where this is followed, and no doubt Chris Hartcher will be asked about this when he fronts ICAC.
Gerard, who would want to leak against Barry O'Farrell?
I've no idea. But who would want to become a politician in this state, where you get dragged off to public hearings, where counsel's assisting, not the commissioner, counsel assisting can make all kinds of allegations, where you have, and you're sort of caught in the spotlight. There's a very strong case for having these hearings in private. I mean, if all we're dealing with is a bottle of wine, which was never sold or traded, There's a very good case for having these hearings in private, but that doesn't is not really what ICAC wants, because ICAC special counsel and whatever like appearing in front of the media, quoting Shakespeare, having smart lines and whatever else. But I don't think this is consistent with good government. If they're your main victims, I think ICAC ought to go away and have a look at itself.
But
okay.
Gerard, you didn't say these things when it was uncovering corruption with Eddie Obeid and Ian McDonald.
Well, I'll tell you one
now.
thing, Kate. I've been asked on the program for 6 years. If someone had asked me, I may have said it, but nothing's happened there. But Eddie Obeid, let me finish.
Why?
Eddie Obeid was sacked by the Labor Premier. ICAC didn't get Obeid, Labor got Obeid.
That's not
Ian
correct.
McDonald was sacked by the Labor Premier
I'm
too.
sorry.
Well, but they were not in government at that stage.
That is not correct.
Well,
Okay, Gerard, the issue of the bottle of Grange, as I mentioned, was raised in the Daily Telegraph in a piece by Andrew Clennell back in March. Now, why did Barry O'Farrell and his office not go back and check the veracity of that claim, before it came up at ICAC around 6 weeks later?
Well, I don't know, but it is consistent with Barry O'Farrell thinking that his position was correct. Didn't need to be checked. It's perfectly consistent with that. It's consistent with a bad memory. It's not consistent with good office practice, as Nick Greiner has hinted, but it's certainly consistent with a bad memory. I don't think it's a hanging offence.
Kate, the Premier was adamant yesterday that he would have remembered a bottle of Grange if it was delivered. Are you surprised that more wasn't done to check up that after the initial inquiry was made by the journalist Andrew Clennell back in March?
Well, this is the fascinating thing. It seems that the actual document from Australian Water Holdings has only materialised in the last day or so. Now, I'm not sure whether it was already within the reams of paper that ICAC had, but they seem to be genuinely taken aback and taken by surprise yesterday when this was raised. They didn't know it was a bottle of Grange until the witness was asked in the witness box. So it's something that has come out of the blue, really. But can I just say, it is an important thing to investigate further. If you are receiving a $3,000 bottle of wine when somebody has $1 billion project in front of you and you did not declare it, it is the purvey of a corruption inquiry to look at those things.
I'm not sure that Kate's ever worked in politics or government. I mean, when you become Premier, you get hit with hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, of letters, of cards, of other gestures of kindness and affection and whatever else. I mean, the idea that you go through every one of these with an idea of what someone might put in evidence against you in 3 years' time is a bit bizarre.
But Gerard, a bottle of Grange is different, isn't it?
Well, to Barry O'Farrell, I wouldn't know. If someone gave me a bottle of Grange, I would have no idea. I would certainly drink it. I would have no idea what it was worth. And according to the Sydney Morning Herald, the authoritative Sydney Morning Herald, the wine's no good at any rate. It was like drinking old rags, according to someone.
That's hardly the point.
Well, maybe he didn't drink it. Maybe he spat it out. I mean, that's a possibility, isn't it? Investigate that. Yes, but I mean,
it's completely irrelevant.
We're having this ridiculous conversation, in my view, where a premier's gone down who was a reformist, honest premier and a very efficient premier over a bottle of wine. This is pretty farcical.
Okay, but it comes back to the question I asked before, Gerard. Then why did he have to resign? If it is a farce, why did he have to resign?
The same way Nick Greiner had to resign, because in the end, he's had a memory failure. That's what I think he's had. Kate says he's untruthful. He's got no evidence of that. He's had a memory failure, and everyone's on him. I mean, it's like walking into the library and all the books suddenly fall on you. All the media's on him, and he can't survive in that circumstance. But what put him in that circumstance?
His
own
words.
It was the ICAC hearing put him in that circumstance.
No, his words.
And this obsession with a bottle of wine. And if you're telling me that ICAC's really happy with the consequences intended or unintended of their outcome, if they're not happy, then perhaps something's gone wrong with ICAC.
No, I'm just saying that when you give evidence, you are giving under oath. And when you say categorically, I did not get that bottle of wine, and if I did, I would have known that a 1959 bottle was valuable and I would have done this, and this.
Well, that's consistent with having a bad memory. That's what it is. So the Premier's gone, he's got a bad memory. Well, there you go. Over something that happened to him at a very, very busy time in his life 3 years ago.
But you can give that evidence. You can say exactly what you just said.
All right. We've run out of time. Thanks very much to both of you.
Absolute pleasure.